When you stop chasing him, one of the most revealing things that happens is that his true intentions become clear. While you're actively chasing, it's easy for him to remain passive. He doesn't need to make much effort because you're already filling in all the blanks, initiating conversations, suggesting plans, keeping the connection alive. In that dynamic, it's hard to tell what he actually wants because he never really has to show it. You're doing all the work, and he just responds when it's convenient. But the moment you step back, the spotlight shifts to him. Now it's his move, and what he does next tells you everything. If he truly cares, if he's genuinely interested, or if he ever saw something meaningful with you, he'll start to show it. He'll reach out, he'll notice the change in energy, and want to understand why. He might even increase his effort, because your absence creates a kind of pressure that forces him to decide, either step up or let go. This isn't about manipulation, it's about balance. Healthy connections are built when both people are willing to show interest, not when one is constantly proving their value to the other. When you stop chasing, you create a space that demands clarity, and clarity can be uncomfortable, especially if the person you're stepping back from was never as invested as you were. But that discomfort is better than confusion, because if he fades away when you stop chasing, if he disappears into silence, if he doesn't even notice you've stopped trying, that tells you more than words ever could. It tells you that he enjoyed the attention, not the relationship. It shows that he liked being wanted, but he wasn't ready to give anything in return. It's painful to accept, but it's also freeing. You no longer have to wonder where you stand, or why he's hot and cold. His actions reveal his heart, and once you have that truth, you can make decisions that serve your worth. Sometimes pulling back is the only way to see clearly who's standing still and who's willing to walk beside you. It removes the fog of hope and reveals the reality. No matter how much you may have wanted a different outcome, when you stop chasing him, you shift the dynamic from desperation to mystery. Before, when you were always available, always initiating, always trying to keep his attention, there was no mystery left. He knew exactly where you stood. He knew that no matter how little effort he made, you would be there. That kind of certainty can feel safe to him, but it also makes you predictable. And predictability, especially when it's combined with over-availability, often kills attraction. People naturally value what feels earned, not what's handed to them without any effort. When you step back, you reintroduce a sense of the unknown. You're no longer offering explanations, you're not chasing answers, and you're not seeking reassurance. Suddenly, he doesn't know what you're thinking. He doesn't know if you're still interested, if you've moved on, or if you've simply grown tired of waiting. That change creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, mystery starts to grow. He begins to wonder, and in that wondering, his curiosity is sparked again. You become less of a certainty and more of a question, and that's where attraction often reignites. People are drawn to mystery not because of games, but because it invites them to engage. It gives them something to explore, something to pursue. When you stop chasing, you allow him to either lean in and close the distance or step back and reveal his lack of depth. Either way, you're no longer presenting yourself as someone desperate for attention or validation. You're presenting yourself as someone grounded, someone assured, someone who doesn't need to chase what doesn't naturally flow toward her. This shift doesn't mean you're cold or unavailable. It simply means your energy is no longer being spent on proving your worth, it's being protected. You're no longer handing over access to your heart freely. You're showing that your time, attention, and affection are valuable, and only those who are willing to step up with clarity and intention will get close enough to experience it. In that quiet shift, from trying to be chosen to choosing yourself, the dynamic changes completely. You no longer feel like someone waiting to be seen. You become someone who knows her values so deeply. It radiates without a single word. When you stop chasing him, something subtle but powerful happens. You begin to attract rather than repel. Most people don't realize this, but the more you try to force something to happen in a relationship, the more resistance you often create. When you constantly reach out, when you double a text, when you drop hints, ask for attention, or try to win someone over, it can come across as pressure even if it's coming from a place of love or fear. And pressure, in romantic dynamics, almost always has the opposite effect of what you want. It makes the other person step back. It triggers a sense of overwhelm or discomfort, especially in someone who's unsure or emotionally unavailable. The more you chase, the more they retreat. But when you stop chasing, that pressure dissolves. The space you create gives them room to breathe. It gives them the opportunity to think about the connection without feeling like they're being pushed toward it. And in that quiet space, something interesting begins to happen. Your energy shifts. You're no longer the one pulling, which automatically causes a shift in the other person. People are naturally curious and drawn to energy that feels grounded, self-contained, and calm. When you stop chasing, you start giving off that energy. Attraction thrives in space. When you're constantly filling the space between you and someone else with effort, explanation, and pursuit, they don't have the chance to feel anything for you on their own. You're always there, so they never get the chance to miss you, to wonder about you, to question whether you're still thinking of them. But when you step back and focus on yourself, when you redirect that energy inward instead of outward, they begin to notice what's no longer there. Your absence creates a new awareness, and that awareness becomes the seed of attraction. You're no longer chasing, which means you're not asking for their attention. You're becoming the kind of person who draws it naturally. You're not trying to convince someone to love you. Becoming someone whose confidence and peace make others want to get closer, that's the difference. True attraction doesn't come from trying to control someone's feelings. It comes from letting go and trusting that if something is meant for you, it won't need to be forced. That energy shift is magnetic. In fact, one of the most attractive things you can do is live your life fully, with or without them. When you're not chasing, you're spending more time doing things that make you feel alive. You're not sitting by the phone waiting, you're out there becoming someone you're proud of. That kind of presence is what people gravitate toward. They see your independence, your joy, your focus, and it draws them in. It makes them wonder how they can fit into your world, rather than you trying to squeeze into theirs. Asterisk, when you stop chasing him, something begins to shift deep within you. You start to heal and grow stronger. At first, it might feel like a loss. You'll probably miss the routine of reaching out, the hope of getting a reply, the rush of small moments of attention. But in the quiet that follows, your mind and heart get a chance to breathe. You're no longer stuck in the cycle of overthinking, waiting, and questioning. That space, though uncomfortable at first, becomes the very place where your healing begins. Chasing someone who doesn't reciprocate creates emotional exhaustion. You pour so much energy into trying to be seen and valued that you start to forget your own needs. But when you stop, that energy doesn't disappear, it returns to you. You finally have the room to ask yourself what you want, how you feel, and whether this connection was really serving your growth. That reflection leads to clarity, and clarity is the beginning of strength. You also begin to build a new relationship with yourself. Without constantly seeking validation from him, you start to validate yourself. You remind yourself that your feelings are real, your needs are valid, and your heart deserves care and respect. This self-connection slowly replaces the emotional dependence you once felt. Day by day, your emotional strength grows. You become less reactive, more centered. You stop chasing closure and start giving it to yourself. Even the pain you feel starts to serve a purpose. It becomes a teacher, showing you where your boundaries were too soft, where your self-worth was placed in someone else's hands, and where you need to hold yourself tighter next time. Healing doesn't always look graceful. It can be messy, emotional, and full of setbacks. But every time you choose not to reach out, every time you choose peace over panic, you build resilience. And strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's the quiet decision to let go of someone who won't meet you halfway. It's choosing stillness over begging, self-respect over confusion. When you stop chasing, you stop bleeding energy. That's when real growth begins, just in how you see him, but in how you finally begin to see yourself. You ever sit there staring at your phone, wondering if he even noticed you stopped texting? You tell yourself not to care, not to reach out, but deep down you're still hoping he'll realize what he lost. The silence feels heavy. The space between you feels louder than any argument you could have had. But here's the truth that most people never tell you: when you stop chasing him, something powerful happens. And it's not just about him missing you. It's about what you discover in the stillness. It's about what shifts inside you when you're no longer trying to prove your worth to someone who couldn't see it from the start. You think letting go means losing, but it doesn't. It means you're finally making room for peace, for clarity, for real connection. Most women don't even realize how much of their light they dim while trying to get someone to choose them. But the moment you stop chasing, that's the moment you stop shrinking. That's the moment the truth reveals itself, not just about him, but about you. And once you see that clearly, you'll never chase again. You won't need to, because now, it's your energy that pulls people in, not your effort. Asterisk, when you stop chasing him, the first thing that happens is he starts to feel the absence of your effort, and that absence speaks louder than any message you could ever send. In the beginning, when you're chasing someone, there's a certain energy you're giving off. Constant availability, eagerness, quick replies, suggestions to meet, checking in on how he feels, and more. You're investing emotionally, and whether he shows it or not, he's feeling that energy. It becomes a comfort. It becomes something he expects. But when you decide to stop, something fundamental changes in the dynamic between you and him. Your silence isn't just quiet, powerful. It removes the ease, the convenience, the comfort he had of knowing that you were always there. That's not punishment or manipulation. That's the natural effect of taking your energy out of a space where it wasn't being valued. At first, he might not even notice. He might just assume you're busy, or that this is a temporary dip in your attention. But as time goes on, and your absence becomes more consistent, he begins to wonder. The human mind fills silence with curiosity. Did something happen? Why did she stop reaching out? Is she okay? Did I say something wrong? It makes him pause and evaluate the situation more seriously. This is especially true if you were always the one showing up. Maybe you were texting, "Good morning." Maybe you were sending TikToks, checking in on his day, suggesting plans, and all of a sudden, that stopped. That shift feels big to him, even if he doesn't admit it. That little hole you left in his daily routine starts to widen. And with it, he starts to realize the role you played in his life. because most people don't realize what they had when they're constantly being fed. They realize it when the flow stops. And what's really interesting is how this change affects his perception of your value. The more you chase, the more you tell him without words that he doesn't need to work for your presence, that he doesn't have to invest, initiate, or show effort, because you'll keep showing up anyway. That makes your time seem less rare, less precious. When you stop chasing, you flip that script. Now your attention feels earned. Now your energy is something to appreciate, not expect. That's when the absence of your effort becomes more noticeable, because for the first time, he's left to either step up or let the connection fade. And that moment reveals everything. It's also important to understand that when someone no longer feels your effort, they begin to notice how it made them feel. Maybe your texts made him feel seen. Maybe your check-ins made him feel supported. Maybe the excitement you brought into conversations gave him a sense of connection or validation. Without realizing it, those little efforts of yours were filling small emotional gaps in his life. When you step back, he has to face those gaps. On his own end, that's when the loss becomes real. This isn't about being cold or distant just for the sake of it. This is about creating space. When you stop chasing, you allow room for two things to happen. 1, for him to recognize your value on his own, and 2, for yourself to observe whether he genuinely cares or was just enjoying your effort without truly reciprocating. That absence gives both sides clarity. You'll see what he does when you're not making the first move, and he'll feel what it's like to be without the person who used to always show up. Sometimes, your silence is the wake-up call he didn't know he needed. Other times, it reveals that he was never truly invested to begin with. Either way, it brings out the truth. It shows who's willing to meet you halfway and who is simply enjoying the benefits of being chased. It's only when you stop giving that someone truly starts to see the weight of what you were offering all along. And in that space, you find out whether they're going to step forward or fade away. Either way, you stop running after someone who should have been running toward you. Asterisk, when you stop chasing him, something powerful begins to happen inside. You start to reclaim your power and self-worth. When you're in the mindset of chasing someone, even if you don't realize it, you're often placing your value in their hands. You wait for their texts to feel seen. You look for signs of interest to feel validated. You interpret their behavior to decide whether you're good enough. That day, without meaning to, you're tying your emotional state to their attention. And the longer you do it, the more disconnected you become from your own value. But when you pull back, even if it's painful at first, you begin to reconnect with parts of yourself that had been neglected. You no longer have your eyes constantly scanning your phone, hoping for a message. You begin to turn that energy inward. Instead of obsessing over what he's doing or thinking, you start paying attention to how you feel, what you need, and what kind of relationship you truly deserve. That's where the shift happens. You begin to realize that your value was never supposed to be proven through someone else's desire for you. It was always meant to be recognized and protected by you first. You remember that you don't have to over-explain, overcompensate, or overgive to earn someone's love. You are not meant to convince someone to see your worth. You're meant to choose people who see it naturally. The moment you stop chasing, you give yourself permission to stop begging for breadcrumbs and start expecting a full seat at the table. That doesn't mean you suddenly feel strong every day. In fact, the first few days might feel empty, even scary. You'll want to reach out. You'll wonder if you made a mistake. But slowly, your nervous system begins to calm down. You stop operating from fear and start standing in a space of calm, grounded confidence. You realize that the silence you're holding isn't weakness, it's strength. Because it takes strength to not react, to not chase, to not fold just because you're afraid of being alone. You begin to focus more on your life again. The energy you were using to chase now gets redirected into things that light you up: your goals, your friendships, your health, your hobbies. And suddenly, you don't just feel better, you start to look more magnetic. Not because you're trying to impress him anymore, but because you're finally showing up for yourself. That glow that people talk about when a woman steps into her power, that's not just some trend. That's what happens when she stops tying her worth to someone else's effort and starts reclaiming all the pieces of herself that she gave away. That's the real shift. You become less interested in convincing someone to choose you and more committed to choosing yourself every single time.